Let's continue our discussion with DNS module in singbox and talking about DNS over proxy. We already seen that if we have a direct outbound, since Cloudflare, between me and Cloudflare there are firewalls, they can hijack our DNS, and the solution is one of the solutions, there are many solutions, is sending the query to Cloudflare over the proxy that we have. So we updated the configuration. Here's the Cloudflare itself. They did nothing to Cloudflare, the Thai interface that we have, but I added the Stereo 2 as the very first outbound, and you can see the server IP and the port, and I'm going to connect to this server here, which is the previous one we had in other modules. So run that DNS over proxy file. We're going to run providing the root privileges, and then if I do dig, for example, x.com, again it's going to be hijacked even if I added the outbound and proxy. The reason is simple. In singbox 12 or probably other versions, even the configuration has changed, but the behavior is expected. Because if we go to, one more time reviewing the workflow, the DNS query comes to the roles, and the DNS query is going to be hijacked for x.com. So it goes up. Here it looks that we have the Cloudflare as a public DNS server to connect to, and tries to connect to this. And since we didn't define any outbound for this connection, singbox by default uses the direct outbound, and that's the problem that right now we are facing. If simply I change that to detour, which is a forwarding for other outbound for a DNS server, to HY2 is the stereo 2, it means if you want to query a DNS using Cloudflare, sends the query through this tunnel for the Cloudflare. And since in the server side there is no firewall between me and Cloudflare, the resolution is going to work and gives me back the real IP for example x.com or any domain that it is. So that's the solution. We have to define a proxy or tunnel or whatever it is, and then updating the endpoint or the way that we want to somehow having this query going through, which is the tunnel that we have. So running it one more time, digx.com, no, we have the real IP address for x.com, or any other things like, for example, facebook.com has been blocked here. And that's the thing that we have. But with solving this problem, we introduced another kind of problem, which I'm going to discuss real quick. If you notice that I'm connecting to this server with IP, and it's not really user friendly to connect to a server using IP. So let's remove the IP and add the domain name, proxy and myname.com. It seems correct, and it seems it should working. Run it, dig, it doesn't work. 28, it doesn't work. Nothing gets here. You can see no request gets here. Why it's happening right now is really simple. We are kind of blocking ourselves. Let's go to the configuration. Even singbox has connections and doesn't allow me to stop the proxy. So a little bit waiting to have the timeout. So when we have a domain here, and first before connecting to the proxy, to the somehow forwarding the DNS request to the proxy, this domain before anything else should be resolved. But since our somehow public DNS for resolving, we have forced it to go to the tunnel, and we didn't we didn't somehow allow the tunnel to work because we defined a domain address. We are in a stuck condition. We are blocking ourselves from initializing the tunnel to send the query to, so we can't do anything here, and we have two solutions actually for resolving this. The first one we saw was using a direct IP. So if we provide a direct IP, the tunnel is made and the query for the x.com goes to the tunnel using and trying to reach, for example, Cloudflare. If we do not should, or if we don't want to use an IP for the domain that we have here at the bottom for the proxy that we have to define another kind of, or another public DNS server, like for example google.com, but we use like 88888, and here the detour actually should be direct, and if we do not define it, by default it means direct. So here for resolving the domain proxy myname.com, we have to provide a separate DNS server to first resolve this domain. When it was resolved, everything else should go to the tunnel and queries should be resolved with the Cloudflare. So, and the solution for this is using a new syntax in singbox 12, domain resolver, which is an object, and we provide a server for that. Server is Cloudflare. No, because Cloudflare goes to the tunnel. We should provide Google. So when we start, the first thing that happens is sending the proxy myname.net to Google. Google resolve that. We get the IP, is going to connect, history is going to be initialized, and then everything else goes to the tunnel, including the Cloudflare request for Cloudflare. Now it should work. It's going to work. digx.com. It's going to work. Let me see what was the error here. Warning. Oh, the domain resolver or default, because also we can define the default domain resolver for an outbound we have defined, and says the domain resolver dial fields are deprecated. Yeah, domain resolver. Actually, it's okay. We can also have the domain resolver here. I mean, in the very bottom, we can say default, like domain resolver, for example, Google. We don't want to do this because we don't want every query goes to the Google. The only query that should go to the Google is this one for resolving the domain for the proxy. After that, everything else should go to the tunnel in order to bypass the hijackers between me and the Cloudflare. That's the reason we did this. Probably it's a little bit confusing. I encourage you to watch the very first videos up to now if it's confusing, to understand why we keep adding more and more configuration. We first added the ton for, in order to work the ton work, we added the hijacking DNS. For hijacking DNS, we need a public DNS server defined in DNS object. And if there's another hijackers between me and the Cloudflare for resolving DNS, we have to add a proxy, and we have to also forward the Cloudflare DNS to the proxy. And since we add a domain name for being resolved first before initializing the proxy, we have to add another public DNS server, but not going through the tunnel. This is going to help us resolving the domain name. After the domain name was resolved, we only use this one for everything else. Hopefully it's clear. Anywhere you have seen the video, comment if you had any question or ideas or your thoughts, or you can join our TonTab Telegram channel. Also, I have created the repository on GitHub, so you can ask questions on GitHub or raise any issues if you had about the proxies and sandbox specifically. Thank you for watching. Let's go to next video.